So anyhow, if we want to talk about these, we have to talk about some topics we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. So we mentioned the idea of populations. So a population would be a group of organisms of the same species living in a particular area. Okay? So that would be a population. Then if we look at communities, we would say all the populations of particular species that would be in that area. So here we could talk about, within this community, all of the species of cottonwood trees and all of the species of spruce, and we had some mallards out here before, all the mallards that would be in this area, all the bears, black bears and brown bears. And we would also think of some of the soil microbes that we can't see, as well as the fish that would be in the pond and the stream here. So that community is affected by the vegetation structure around here, okay? And when we talk about individual species, we talk about them having a habitat, or essentially the place that they live. And so we would have to define that habitat. So in some cases, we can talk about a habitat that's basically post-glacial here, or we could talk more specifically about a stream or a pond habitat. But when the beavers came in and created this disturbance, they created new habitat that actually has many different little parts. So we have a stream. We have, that stream was there before, but now they've made ponds. We have flooded wetlands areas, and we have the moraine that was originally here with the different early successional stages, okay? So the activity of the beavers has actually increased the number of species here, because it's in changing this particular area, it's now become good habitat for, more so for ducks. So we have, usually in the summer here, we have summer dancers who raise youngsters and mallards. The eagles like it because they can sit up here in the cottonwoods and watch the fish before they catch them. And we now have black and brown bears in here. And they're coming here to get the fish, but the fact that we have them in ponds where they're blocked by dams makes it a little easier for the bears to get them. Right?
And what kind of fish are here?
Coho, and I think, I forget whether is it chum? I think it might be chum. I forget, I have to look. Maybe it's pigs. But we do have a late run in the fall, so it would be the coho. But, so this area is pretty active and a great place to watch wildlife. If you go back a distance into the forest, the habitat that you get there is less varied, okay? If you look around here, though, the beavers had really a profound impact on the place. I should say that if you look around here, you'll see some of the cottonwoods. This one back here in particular has a fence around it. And there are some downsides to beavers, which is that they like cottonwoods, and they would gladly cut that one down. And some of the trees they use more for food, and some of them they use more for building. But the problem is that there's a little conflict there, because the eagles like to sit on them, since they're the taller tree here. They're taller than all the spruce, for instance. But if we talk about the beavers, then we talk about them creating a new habitat here, and we're thinking about secondary succession, right? If we talk about primary succession, we're talking about the orderly progression of plant species that happens after glaciers have receded, or some other event like the formation of new islands. In those communities that crop up from that particular landscape, you find that there weren't any or very many soil microorganisms, and there weren't usually very many plants in that area. We don't want to say that there never is a time when a glacier doesn't go around the top of a mountain, or down below a particular ledge or something. So there might be plants that would persist in those areas, but those plants would help to produce seeds that would populate, say, the other areas. But so anyhow, when you stand here, the trees are pretty big, and you're looking at the spruce trees. They're well above the willows. You can see some mosses over here, We have grasses here. The cottonwoods are much bigger than the spruce. Now, when we get up and we talk about primary succession, um, we'll be a little closer to the glacier, and we can talk then about some of the relationships that we come along here, but just kind of remembering kind of the sequence and time phases. The visitor center that's over here, back in the 1960s apparently was the same location that there was a pie shop there. And the glacier was apparently right in front of the pie shop. So, because I know people who used to come here on Saturdays, the big thing was they came and they got hamburgers, you know, and that time that was special. And the glacier wasn't that far off. And then if you go down towards the back loop road, you can see where the end of the last moraine was the most recent period of glaciation. So now you have to go back and say, when did the glaciers really start their rapid retreat? And we're talking about someplace between 8,000 to 12 or maybe 15,000 years ago. And the glaciers that we have today are remnants really of the big ice sheets that once covered North America. So these glaciers are part of the Juneau ice field. You might have other glaciers that are part of what would we say, the Stikine ice fields, okay? But those big ice fields were once part of the big ice sheet that covered the coast. Now there was another bigger ice sheet that covered the interior of what is Canada and down to Wisconsin and New York and that area. But we had those glaciers from about 1.8 million to maybe to the period of time that I was talking about. But between the 1.8 and the 100,000, we had fairly, I hope they're not recording, had really regular intervals of repeated glaciation and warming and onward. We're having some of that now too. But that's there's a whole nother story there about the Milankovitch cycle, which we don't have time to go to. So in any event, right where we are then is something, this area would have been glaciated something longer than, say, the 50s, okay? If you walk over on that side of the road, you can take the trail of the glacier and you can see places, you'll see on the rocks where it's marked, the glacier was there in 1911 or 1920 or something like that. And then over here it's a little bit different, but you can see the topography is different too. And that also has an effect. And, you know, ice is to some degree like water. It takes the path where there's, you know, the least resistance. So we're just going to walk up here and take a look from the shelter, because that's where I took the other class too. And then we'll stop and we'll pretty much be done. But you can just see it is